Juno's azure fingers quivered as she lifted the delicate blanket, exposing the unfamiliar anatomy of the human soldier beneath. Her eyes widened, jaws slack with disbelief at the sight before her. In her 3 years as a Daxamite medic, she had never encountered such alien physiology. The makeshift medical bay aboard the Daxamite warship buzzed with activity. Injured human captives lay on stark metal beds, their tanned skin a stark contrast to the cold, sterile surroundings. Juno had been assigned to examine these prisoners, a responsibility she approached with scientific curiosity and a hint of apprehension. Her first patient was Marcus Bryant, an unconscious human soldier with a muscular build and short dark hair. As she began her routine examination, Juno noticed an unusual bulge in his lower body. Curiosity overtook her professional demeanor, leading to her shocking discovery. Overwhelmed by the unexpected sight, Juno stumbled backward. Her elbow knocked a nearby tray, sending medical instruments clattering to the floor. The noise echoed through the bay, drawing unwanted attention. Heavy footsteps approached, and the door hissed open. Captain Zorl, a towering Daxamite with piercing eyes, strode into the medical bay. His blue skin seemed to darken with annoyance as he surveyed the scene. "Explain yourself, medic," Zorl demanded, his voice carrying the weight of authority. Juno straightened, her heart racing. "Sir, I've discovered something about human anatomy and Fredmess. It's unlike anything we've seen before." Zorl's expression shifted from irritation to intrigue. He approached Marcus's bed, his gaze falling on the exposed humans. A slow smile spread across his face as he realized the potential significance of this discovery. "This could be the advantage we need," Zorl mused. "These phrases." He turned to Juno, his eyes glinting with determination. "Conduct thorough examinations on all human prisoners. Document everything. This information could be crucial to our war effort." As Zorl issued his orders, Marcus began to stir. His eyes fluttered open, confusion quickly giving way to panic as he realized his vulnerable position. He scrambled to cover himself, his movements drawing the attention of nearby Daxamite guards. "No, stay back," Marcus growled, his voice hoarse. He attempted to sit up, but strong blue hands pushed him back down. Juno hesitated, her ethical training clashing with her duty. She looked from Marcus's defiant face to Zorl's expectant one, feeling caught between two worlds. As she reluctantly prepared to continue her examination, a shrill alarm pierced the air. Red lights flashed throughout the medical bay as the ship's warning system blared. Zorl's communicator crackled to life, relaying urgent information about an approaching Earth rescue fleet. "Secure the prisoners!" Zorl barked at Juno before rushing out to command the impending space battle. In the ensuing chaos, Marcus saw his opportunity. With a sudden burst of strength, he overpowered a distracted guard, breaking free from his restraints. His hands found a fallen weapon, and in one fluid motion he grabbed Juno, using her as a shield. "You're coming with me," Marcus hissed in her ear, his breath warm against her skin. Juno's world spun as she found herself pressed against the human, his alien anatomy now an all-too-real presence at her back. As Marcus forced her through the corridors of the Daxamite warship, explosions rocked the vessel. The human rescue fleet had engaged, and now both captor and captive faced a new threat: survival. With each step, Juno felt the heat of Marcus's body, the strength in his grip. Despite the danger, she couldn't help but be acutely aware of their proximity, of the differences between their species that suddenly seemed less important in the face of imminent death. As they navigated the chaos of a ship under attack, Juno realized that her fate, and perhaps the fate of this war, now rested in the hands of this strange alien being she had only just begun to understand. The ship lurched violently, throwing Marcus off balance. His grip on Juno loosened, and she stumbled forward, her blue skin glistening with sweat in the flashing red emergency lights. Another explosion rocked the vessel, and a section of the corridor ahead collapsed in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. Juno's instincts took over. Instead of fleeing, she grabbed Marcus's arm and pulled him towards a nearby maintenance hatch. "This way!" she shouted over the blaring alarms. Marcus hesitated for a split second, his weapon still trained on her. But as the deck beneath them buckled, he realized he had no choice. He followed Juno into the narrow shaft, just as the remainder of the corridor caved in behind them. The maintenance tunnel was cramped and dark, forcing them to crawl on hands and knees. The ship's artificial gravity fluctuated wildly, causing them to float momentarily before slamming back down onto the cold metal floor. Their bodies pressed together in the confined space, and Marcus became acutely aware of Juno's alien physiology. Her cool skin, the subtle ridges along her spine, the faint phosphorescent glows she emitted in the darkness. "Where are we going?" Marcus grunted, his muscles straining as he pulled himself forward. Juno's voice came from somewhere ahead of him. "These tunnels run throughout the ship over Carini. If we can reach the central hub, we might find a way to the escape pods." They crawled in tense silence for what felt like hours, their progress punctuated by distant explosions and the groaning of the ship's stressed superstructure. Marcus's mind raced, torn between his training as a soldier and the surreal situation he found himself in. Suddenly, Juno stopped. "Listen," she whispered. The wind echoed. Voices echoed through the maze of tunnels, panicked shouts in the guttural Daxamite language. Juno translated in hushed tones. "They're saying the starboard section is completely depressurized. They're heading for the escape pods." Before Marcus could respond, the tunnel hatch ahead of them burst open. A group of terrified Daxamite crew members poured in, their eyes wide with fear. In the chaos, Marcus and Juno were swept apart by the surge of bodies. "Juno!" Marcus called out, but his voice was lost in the cacophony of alarms and shouting aliens. The current of panicked Daxamites carried Marcus through a series of winding passages until he found himself ejected into a vast, dimly lit chamber. Banks of humming machinery lined the walls, pulsing with energy. Marcus's military training kicked in as he recognized the significance of the room he had stumbled into, the ship's data core. Without hesitation, he approached a nearby console. His fingers flew over the alien controls, his mind racing to recall the crash course in Daxamite technology he'd received during his special ops training. A few tense moments later, the console chimed, and a stream of data began flowing onto a portable device he'd snatched from a nearby workstation. As the download progressed, Marcus's thoughts drifted to Juno, the Daxamite medic's unexpected assistance. Why had she helped him, and where was she now? Meanwhile, Juno found herself in a different part of the ship entirely, the medical storage area. She moved quickly, her trained eyes scanning the shelves of alien pharmaceuticals and equipment. She grabbed a med kit and filled it with essential supplies, coagulants, broad-spectrum antibiotics, and a few vials of powerful sedatives. As she worked, her mind replayed the earlier examination of Marcus. The stark differences in their anatomies both fascinated and unnerved her. Despite the dire circumstances, she couldn't help but wonder about the intricacies of human physiology. A violent tremor shook the room, snapping Juno back to reality. The ship's systems were failing rapidly. She needed to move. Back in the data core, Marcus completed the download just as the lights flickered and died. Emergency power kicked in, bathing the room in an eerie red glow. He pocketed the data device and moved towards the exit, only to find it sealed shut. "Oxygen levels critical in Section 5 Alpha," an emotionless voice announced over the ship's comm system. "Initiating emergency protocols." The floor beneath Marcus's feet suddenly vanished, and he found himself floating in zero gravity. He flailed for a moment before his training took over, and he oriented himself in the weightless environment. A hatch at the far end of the chamber slid open, revealing Captain Zorl and a squad of Daxamite soldiers, their magnetic boots allowing them to walk on the walls and ceiling. "The human prisoner," Zorl snarled, his voice distorted by his pressure suit's comm system. "Capture him." Marcus's hand found his weapon, and he squeezed the trigger. The recoil sent him spinning, but the energy blast caught one of the Daxamite soldiers square in the chest. To Marcus's surprise, the alien let out a high-pitched shriek and clutched his ears in agony. The weapon's discharge had created a specific frequency that seemed to cause the Daxamites intense discomfort. Marcus grinned, a plan forming in his mind. He adjusted his weapon settings and fired again, this time in a wide arc. The sound waves reverberated through the chamber, and the Daxamite squad writhed in pain, their coordinated attack falling apart. But Marcus's advantage was short-lived. The prolonged exposure to zero gravity began to take its toll. His stomach churned, and a throbbing headache set in. The Daxamites, more accustomed to such conditions, began to rally. Just as Zorl was about to close in on Marcus, a new figure entered the fray. Juno burst through a maintenance hatch, her eyes wide as she took in the scene before her. In her hand, she clutched a medical injector. Time seemed to slow as Juno's gaze met Marcus's. In that moment, a decision was made that would alter the course of both their lives. Juno kicked off the wall, propelling herself towards the Daxamite squad with practiced precision. She jabbed the injector into Zorl's neck. The captain's eyes rolled back, and he went limp. "What are you doing?" one of the soldiers cried out in their native tongue. "Saving a life," Juno replied, her voice steady as she moved to incapacitate the remaining Daxamites with her sedative. Marcus watched in awe as Juno neutralized her own people. When the last soldier floated unconscious, Juno turned to him, her expression a mix of fear and tenacity. "We need to move," she said, extending a hand towards Marcus. "This ship isn't going to last much longer." As if to emphasize her point, a deep, ominous rumble reverberated through the ship's hull. Warning klaxons blared to life, and a computerized voice echoed through the chamber. "Warning! Core meltdown imminent. All personnel proceed to escape pods immediately. Time to critical failure. 10 minutes. Marcus grabbed Juno's hand, their fingers intertwining as they pushed off towards the exit. As they navigated the labyrinth of failing ship systems, a crucial decision loomed before them. Risk the Daxamite escape pods, or gamble on signaling the Earth rescue fleet. With time running out and the ship disintegrating around them, Marcus and Juno faced a choice that would determine not only their fate, but potentially the course of the Interstellar War. The countdown to destruction had begun, and every second brought them closer to either salvation or oblivion. The choice crystallized in Marcus's mind as he turned to Juno, his grip on her hand tightening. "The Earth fleet," he said firmly. Juno nodded, her phosphorescent skin pulsing with a mix of fear and grit. They pushed off from the wall, propelling themselves through the chaotic corridors of the dying ship. Debris floated around them, creating a treacherous obstacle course as they made their way towards the communication center. A violent tremor shook the vessel, sending them careening into a bulkhead. Marcus grunted in pain as his shoulder took the brunt of the impact. Juno's cool hand steadied him, her touch lingering for a moment longer than necessary. "Are you all right?" she asked, her alien eyes scanning him for injury. "I'm fine," Marcus assured her, ignoring the throbbing in his shoulder. "We need to keep moving." They pressed on, dodging falling panels and sparking wires. The ship's emergency lighting cast an eerie red glow over everything, making the Daxamite vessel seem more like a tomb than a warship. As they approached the communication center, a cloud of acrid smoke billowed from the entrance. Marcus and Juno exchanged a worried glance before pushing through. The scene inside was one of devastation. Consoles sparked and fizzled, their displays cracked and dark. Ceiling panels hung precariously, swaying in the unstable artificial gravity. Marcus's military training kicked in as he assessed the damage, his eyes darting from one piece of equipment to another, his mind racing to formulate a plan. "We need to cobble together a transmitter," he said, already moving towards a relatively intact console. "Can you tell me anything about Daxamite communication protocols?" Juno hesitated for a split second, her ingrained loyalty warring with their dire circumstances. Then she nodded, floating over to join him. "Our subspace frequencies operate on a rotating encryption," she explained, her fingers dancing over the alien controls. "But I know the base algorithm. If we can tap into the main antenna array, we might be able to boost our signal enough to reach your fleet." They worked in tandem, Marcus's human ingenuity complementing Juno's Daxamite expertise as they reconnected wires and routed power. The ship's artificial gravity failed completely, and they found themselves suddenly weightless. Tools and components floated away from their grasp. Marcus cursed under his breath, reaching out to grab a drifting circuit board. As he did so, he collided with Juno, their bodies pressing together in the zero-gravity environment. For a moment they were frozen, acutely aware of each other's alien physiology. Marcus could feel the coolness of Juno's skin, the subtle ridges of her face mere inches from his own. The moment was shattered by the sound of approaching voices. Marcus and Juno quickly disentangled themselves, turning to face the newcomers. A group of injured Daxamite soldiers floated into the comm center, led by a stern-faced officer. His uniform, though torn and bloodied, still bore the insignia of a lieutenant. "Juno," the officer said, his voice a mix of confusion and anger. "What are you doing with this human prisoner?" Juno's body tensed. "Lieutenant Cryox," she said, her voice steady despite the fear Marcus could see in her eyes. "I can explain." "Explain?" Cryox snarled. "It looks like treason to me." The Daxamite soldiers raised their weapons, but Marcus was faster. He aimed his stolen weapon at the group, adjusting its settings as he did. "I wouldn't if I were you," Marcus warned, his finger on the trigger. "Unless you want another dose of that sonic frequency you're so fond of." The Daxamites hesitated, their earlier encounter with the weapon's effects still fresh in their minds. Cryox's eyes narrowed as he assessed the situation. "Juno," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Step away from the human. Now." Marcus felt Juno tense beside him. He glanced at her, seeing the conflict raging in her alien features. For a heartbeat, he feared she might comply with her superior's order. Then, in a blur of motion, Juno reached for her medkit. Before anyone could react, she had extracted a hypospray and lunged towards Cryox. With practiced precision, she pressed the device against his neck. The lieutenant's eyes widened in shock, before rolling back in his head as the sedative took effect. The other Daxamite soldiers, caught off guard by Juno's actions, were slow to respond. Marcus took advantage of their hesitation, firing his weapon. The sonic blast sent the aliens reeling, clutching their ears in agony. Juno moved swiftly, administering sedatives to the incapacitated soldiers before they could recover. In a matter of moments, the entire group was unconscious, floating harmlessly in the zero-gravity environment. Marcus stared at Juno, a mix of admiration and uncertainty in his eyes. "You chose to help me," he said softly. Juno met his gaze, her alien features set in grit. "I chose to do what's right," she replied. They turned back to their makeshift transmitter, aware that time was running out. As they worked, Marcus noticed Juno's movements becoming more erratic, her breathing labored. "Are you okay?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. Juno shook her head, her phosphorescent skin dimming slightly. I never thought I'd betray my own people like this. Everything I believed about this war." Marcus placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, marveling at the coolness of her skin. "Sometimes the hardest thing is realizing that what we've been taught isn't always the truth." As if in response to his words, the transmitter crackled to life. A stream of data flowed across the makeshift screen, revealing a shocking truth hidden in the ship's communication logs. "By the stars," Juno whispered, her eyes widening as she read the information. "Earth has been sending peace offerings for months. Our high command? They've been hiding it from us, prolonging the war deliberately." Marcus felt a mix of anger and vindication surge through him. "We need to get this information out," he said urgently. "It could change everything." They redoubled their efforts, working frantically to establish a connection with the Earth rescue fleet. The ship groaned around them, the sound of tearing metal echoing through the corridors. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a human voice crackled through the speakers. This is Captain Sarah Webb of the Earthship Horizon. Identify yourself." Marcus leaned towards the makeshift microphone, relief evident in his voice. "Captain Webb, this is Sergeant Marcus Cole, ID number 7729 Alpha. I'm aboard a Daxamite warship about to go critical. I have vital information about Daxamite vulnerabilities and evidence of suppressed peace negotiations." As Marcus quickly relayed the situation and the crucial information he discovered, Juno floated beside him, her alien features a mix of awe and trepidation. The realization that her entire worldview had been built on lies took a toll on her. Captain Webb's voice came through again, urgent and authoritative. "Understood, Sergeant Cole. We're locking onto your position now. Stand by for emergency teleportation." A series of violent explosions rocked the ship, cutting off the transmission. Alarms blared with renewed intensity, and a computerized voice announced, "Critical system failure imminent! All personnel evacuate immediately!" Marcus and Juno exchanged a panicked look before pushing off towards the nearest airlock. They navigated the chaotic corridors, dodging debris and sparking electrical fires. As they approached the airlock, their hopes were dashed. The door was jammed, the control panel a mess of shorted circuits and cracked displays. "No, no, no!" Marcus muttered frantically, trying to override the system. Juno's eyes darted around, searching for alternatives. Her gaze landed on a single escape pod nearby, its hatch still intact. "There!" she shouted, pointing towards the pod. They rushed towards it, hope rekindling, but as they reached the pod, a grim reality set in. The escape vehicle was designed for a single occupant. Marcus and Juno stared at each other, the unspoken question hanging between them. Who would take the pod, and who would stay behind? The ship shuddered violently, the hull groaning under the strain of multiple breaches. Time was running out, and a decision had to be made. In that moment, as alarms blared and the ship crumbled around them, Marcus and Juno found themselves facing not just the possibility of death, but the unexpected depth of their connection to each other. The human soldier and the Daxamite medic, thrown together by the chaos of war, now united in a desperate bid for survival. As they grappled with the impossible choice before them, the countdown to the ship's destruction ticked relentlessly onward, each second bringing them closer to a finale that would shape not only their fates, but potentially the course of the entire interstellar conflict. Marcus and Juno stared at the single-occupant escape pod, the reality of their situation sinking in like a stone in water. The ship's alarms blared louder, more insistent, as if screaming at them to make a decision. "You have to go," Marcus said, his voice firm despite the turmoil in his chest. "Your medical knowledge, what you know about Daxamite physiology, it could be the key to ending this war." Juno's phosphorescent skin pulsed with conflicting emotions. "No! I can't leave you here to die. There has to be another way." The ship groaned, a deep metallic sound that reverberated through their bodies. Cracks began to form along the walls, thin lines spreading like a web of destruction. Marcus placed his hands on Juno's shoulders, feeling the coolness of her alien skin through the torn fabric of her uniform. "Listen to me. You have to survive. What we've discovered could change everything. The peace negotiations, the lies of your high command. The galaxy needs to know." Juno's alien eyes searched his face, a war of emotions playing across her features. With a resigned nod, she moved towards the escape pod. As the airlock began to seal, something in her snapped. In a blur of motion, she reached out and grabbed Marcus, pulling him into the cramped space with her. "What are you doing?" Marcus gasped as they collided in the tight confines of the pod. "Saving both of us," Juno replied, her fingers flying over the control panel. She overrode the pod's safety protocols, allowing it to launch with 2 passengers. The pod ejected from the dying warship with a violent jolt. Through the small viewport they watched as the Daxamite vessel erupted into a brilliant explosion, shards of metal and energy scattering across the void of space. The force of the blast sent their tiny craft tumbling. Marcus and Juno were tossed about the cramped interior, their limbs tangling as they struggled to reach the controls. Marcus grunted as Juno's elbow caught him in the ribs while her head knocked against his chin. "The stabilizers!" Juno gasped, stretching her arm towards a flashing panel. "Kelly, we need to activate them before we spin out of control." Working in tandem, they managed to steady the pod's trajectory. As the chaotic motion subsided, they became acutely aware of their proximity. Juno was practically sitting in Marcus's lap, her back pressed against his chest. "We did it," Marcus said, a note of relief in his voice. But his celebration was short-lived, as he noticed a series of warning lights blinking on the control panel. "What's wrong, Ju?" Juno's expression tightened as she read the Daxamite text scrolling across the small screen. "The life support systems are strained. This pod wasn't designed for 2 occupants. Tifishu. We're depleting the oxygen levels faster than they can be replenished." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the dropping temperature in the pod. "How long do we have?" "At this rate, maybe 2 hours." Juno's voice was grim. "We need to find a way to signal the Earth Rescue Fleet." Marcus nodded, his military training kicking in. "I downloaded data from the Daxamite ship before we left. Maybe we can use it to boost the pod's distress beacon." They set to work, Juno translating the Daxamite systems while Marcus applied his human ingenuity to reconfigure the pod's communication array. The close quarters made their task challenging, but they developed a rhythm, moving around each other with practiced ease. As Marcus connected 2 wires, causing a spark of electricity, Juno suddenly tensed. "Wait," she said, her eyes fixed on a blinking light. "We've got company." Marcus followed her gaze to the pod's rudimentary sensor display. A larger blip was approaching their position. "Daxamite!" Juno nodded, her skin pulsing with anxiety. "A patrol ship." "They must be looking for survivors or escapees," Marcus added grimly. He looked at their half-finished work on the distress beacon, then back at the approaching ship. "We need to hide!" Without hesitation, Marcus began powering down all non-essential systems, including life support. The pod's interior plunged into darkness, the only light coming from Juno's faintly glowing skin and the dim emergency strips along the floor. "What are you doing?" Juno whispered, her breath visible in the rapidly cooling air. "Making us invisible," Marcus replied, his voice low. "No power signature, no heat signature. It's risky, but it's our only chance." They held their breath as the Daxamite ship drew near. In the darkness, Marcus could feel Juno's body trembling against his. Whether from fear or the increasing cold, he couldn't tell. He instinctively wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as they waited, motionless and silent. Finally, the blip on their sensor display moved away, the Daxamite ship continuing its search pattern in another sector. Marcus let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "They're gone," he said, reaching for the controls to restore power. But as systems came back online, the reality of their situation became clear. The life support systems, already strained, had taken a hit from the complete shutdown. Oxygen levels were critically low, and the temperature inside the pod was barely above freezing. "We need to conserve energy," Juno said, her teeth chattering slightly. "Both the pod's and our own," Marcus nodded, understanding the implication. They huddled together in the center of the pod, sharing body heat. Juno's cooler Daxamite physiology meant she was feeling the cold more acutely, so Marcus positioned her between himself and the pod's power core, which gave off a faint warmth. As they lay there, conserving oxygen with slow, measured breaths, Marcus found himself hyper-aware of Juno's presence. The subtle ridges of her alien skin, the faint glow she emitted, the way her body fit against his, it all served to remind him of the unlikely connection they'd formed. "Look," Juno whispered suddenly, pointing out the viewport. Marcus followed her gaze and felt a surge of hope. In the distance, growing larger by the second, was an Earth ship. The horizon had found them. Their elation was short-lived, however, as they realized their pod's communications were still offline. They had no way to signal the approaching rescue ship. "We need to get their attention," Marcus said, already moving towards the airlock. "I'll suit up, and—" Juno's hand on his arm stopped him. "No," she said, her alien eyes meeting his. "I'll go." "What are you talking about?" Marcus asked, confusion evident in his voice. "My people," Juno explained. "We evolved the ability to survive in vacuum for short periods. It was a trait developed for emergency repairs on our ships." Marcus stared at her, processing this new information. "Are you sure about this?" Juno nodded, her expression determined. "It's our best chance. Help me into the suit. It'll give me some extra protection, even if it's too big." As Marcus helped Juno into the oversized spacesuit, their hands lingered on each other, conveying emotions too complex for words. When she was ready, Juno stood at the airlock, a piece of reflective debris clutched in her hand to signal the horizon. "Be careful," Marcus said, his voice thick with concern. Juno's alien features softened into what Marcus recognized as a smile. Then, with a hiss of escaping air, the airlock opened, and Juno propelled herself into the void of space. Marcus watched anxiously, as Juno's blue skin, visible through gaps in the ill-fitting suit, grew smaller against the backdrop of stars. She waved the reflective debris, trying to catch the attention of the approaching Earthship. Just as it seemed their plan might work, a familiar blip appeared on the pod's sensor display. The Daxamite patrol ship had returned, drawn by the horizon's presence. Marcus's heart raced as he realized the dangerous situation unfolding before him. Juno floated vulnerably in space, her oxygen supply dwindling, caught between two opposing forces. The fate of not only their lives, but also the vital information they carried, hung in the balance. As the three-way confrontation unfolded before him, the tension in the cramped escape pod was palpable. As Marcus watched the sensor display, his heart pounded in his chest. Suddenly, a bright beam of light cut through the darkness of space. The horizon had activated its tractor beam, reaching out to pull Juno to safety. For a moment, relief washed over Marcus, But the reprieve was short-lived. The Daxamite patrol ship, previously circling at a distance, sprang into action. A series of energy blasts erupted from its weapons array, streaking towards the horizon in angry red lines. The Earth ship's shields flared as they absorbed the initial barrage, but the attack forced it to take evasive action. The sudden movement caused the tractor beam to fluctuate wildly. Through the pod's viewport, Marcus watched in horror as Juno's form jerked and spun, caught in the unstable energy field. She was suspended in the void between the two warring vessels, a fragile figure against the vast emptiness of space. Marcus's military training kicked in, pushing aside fear and indecision. He knew what he had to do. With quick, practiced movements, he pieced together the remaining parts of the spacesuit. The fit was awkward and incomplete, but it would have to do. As he sealed the helmet, Marcus took one last look at the sensor display. The two ships were fully engaged now, exchanging fire in a deadly dance. Marcus positioned himself at the escape pod's airlock. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. With a hiss of escaping air, the outer door slid open. The void of space rushed to greet him, its cold embrace threatening to overwhelm his senses. But Marcus was ready. He pushed off from the pod, using its maneuvering thrusters to propel himself towards Juno's drifting form. As he sailed through the emptiness, Marcus became acutely aware of the battle raging around him. Energy beams crisscrossed his path, their heat searing even through his protective suit. Chunks of metal and crystalline debris spun past, some close enough to graze his helmet. Marcus's focus remained fixed on Juno. Her movements were becoming sluggish, her oxygen clearly running low. He pushed his suit's thrusters to their limit, eating up the distance between them. Just as he reached her, Juno's eyes fluttered behind her faceplate. The gauge on her suit blinked an angry red. Oxygen depletion critical. Without hesitation, Marcus pressed his helmet against hers, their faceplates connecting with a soft click. "Breathe," he commanded, activating the oxygen share function on his suit. Juno's eyes widened as fresh air flooded her system, her chest rising and falling in desperate gulps. Working quickly, Marcus began to improvise a tether. He detached non-essential components from both their suits, twisting and knotting them together to form a makeshift rope. As he worked, he kept stealing glances at the ongoing battle, acutely aware of their vulnerable position. With the tether complete, Marcus secured one end to his suit and the other to Juno's. He gave it a firm tug, ensuring it would hold under the stresses to come. Then, positioning himself behind Juno, he began to navigate them towards the horizon. Their progress was agonizingly slow. The Earth ship's erratic movements, necessary to avoid the Daxamite vessel's attacks, made it a challenging target. More than once, Marcus had to adjust their trajectory to avoid being caught in the crossfire. Aboard the horizon, Captain Sarah Webb watched the unfolding drama with a mixture of admiration and concern. The two figures drifting through the battlefield represented not just lives to be saved, but a potential turning point in the war. "Tactical," she barked, her eyes never leaving the main view screen. Her weapons officer responded quickly. "Captain, if we divert power from our aft shields, we could create a temporary safe corridor where it would leave us exposed, but it might give them the opening they need." Webb nodded, her decision made before the officer finished speaking. "Do it! Helm, bring us about. And the tot. Let's give our friends out there a chance." The horizon pivoted its sleek form, angling to create a buffer between the drifting pair and the Daxamite ship. Energy crackled as shield power was rerouted, forming a visible tunnel of calm amidst the chaos of battle. Marcus saw the opportunity immediately. Using the last reserves of his suit's propulsion system, he maneuvered himself and Juno toward the opening. They were halfway to safety when the Daxamite ship unleashed its secret weapon. A wave of distortion rippled through space, warping light and matter in its path. Marcus felt the effects immediately. Crushing pressure followed by a sensation of weightlessness, then pressure again. The tether between him and Juno strained under the gravitational fluctuations. With a sickening snap, the improvised lifeline broke. Marcus watched in horror as Juno began to drift away, pulled by the spatial anomalies towards the Daxamite vessel. In that moment, all the battles he'd fought, all the training he'd endured, crystallized into a single purpose. He would not lose her. Gritting his teeth against the disorienting forces, Marcus spotted a piece of debris floating nearby, part of a communications array. its edges still glowing from weapons fire. He grabbed it, the heat searing through his gloves, and used it as a launch pad. With a grunt of exertion, he propelled himself towards Juno's receding form now. As he closed the distance, Marcus saw Juno's body go rigid. For a heart-stopping moment, he feared the worst. Then, to his amazement, her skin began to pulse with an intense blue light. Arcs of energy danced across her suit, growing in intensity until they exploded outward in a dazzling electromagnetic pulse. The effect was immediate. The Daxamite tractor beam flickered and died, releasing its hold on Juno. But the pulse had also affected Marcus's suit, shutting down his remaining systems. They were both now adrift, their oxygen supplies dwindling rapidly as darkness began to creep into the edges of his vision. Marcus saw the horizon execute a maneuver that, under any other circumstances, would have been suicidal. The ship dove towards them, its emergency airlock extending like a lifeline. With the last of his strength, Marcus reached out and grabbed Juno's hand. Together, they tumbled into the airlock. The outer doors sealed shut behind them just as consciousness began to slip away. The next thing Marcus knew, he was lying in a medical pod, the sterile smell of the ship's infirmary filling his nostrils. He turned his head, relief flooding through him as he saw Juno in the adjacent pod. Their eyes met, a wealth of unspoken emotions passing between them. But before either could speak, the infirmary doors slid open. Admiral Victor Petro strode in, his expression a mix of curiosity and stern authority. As the admiral approached, Marcus realized that their ordeal in space was only the beginning. The real challenge, convincing their people to end this war, was just starting. The horizon hummed around them, its engines pushing them towards Earth in an uncertain future. In the distance, long-range sensors detected movement. A massive Daxamite fleet was mobilizing. Time, it seemed, was not on their side. The horizon pushed onward, its engines thrumming with urgency as Earth grew larger in the viewscreen. Admiral Victor Petro strode onto the bridge, his weathered face a mask of concentration. He glanced at Marcus and Juno, still clad in their medical gowns, then turned to the ship's captain. "Status report," he barked. Captain Webb responded crisply. "Sir, long-range sensors confirm the Daxamite fleet's movement. They'll reach Earth orbit within 48 hours. Petro nodded, his eyes narrowing. "We don't have much time. I want Marcus and Juno in the main conference room for a joint debriefing in 30 minutes. Marcus raised an eyebrow, surprised by the Admiral's decision to forego separate interrogations. He caught Juno's eye, noticing a flicker of relief in her alien features. As they made their way to the conference room, Marcus felt the weight of the data chip in his pocket. The information he'd risked everything to obtain now seemed more crucial than ever. The conference room buzzed with tension as Marcus uploaded the stolen Daxamite data. Holograms flickered to life, filling the air with schematics and tactical readouts. Petro leaned forward, his eyes gleaming as he absorbed the wealth of information. "This is extraordinary," the Admiral murmured. "Details of their fleet movements, weapons capabilities. And what's this about peace negotiations?" Marcus nodded grimly. "It seems there were secret talks underway, sir, but someone on the Daxamite side was suppressing them." Juno's voice was soft but steady as she added, "There are factions within our society that profit from the war. They would not easily give up their power." As the debriefing continued, Marcus found himself stealing glances at Juno. Her insights into Daxamite culture and military strategy were invaluable, filling in gaps that even the stolen data couldn't provide. Yet he could see the toll her defection was taking on her, the weight of betrayal evident in the set of her shoulders. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the ship. "Captain Webb," a voice crackled over the intercom. "We've entered Earth's defense perimeter. The Daxamite fleet has been detected on an intercept course." Petro's teeth clenched. "It's time to make a decision, Marcus. This data indicates a vulnerability to certain sound frequencies. Could we use that?" Marcus nodded, his mind racing, even the freeze. "If we can get close enough, we could potentially disable their entire fleet. I'll lead a strike team," he continued, the plan forming as he spoke. "We infiltrate their flagship, deploy the sonic disruptors from within." Juno stepped forward, her alien eyes flashing with tenacity. "I'm going with you. You'll need my knowledge of Daxamite ship layouts to succeed." Before Petro could respond, The conference room doors hissed open. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the ship's lead xenobiologist, burst in, her face flushed with excitement and concern. "Admiral, I have urgent news about Juno's condition," she said, her words tumbling out in a rush. "The higher oxygen content in our atmosphere is accelerating her cellular processes. It's granting her enhanced abilities, but it could also cause long-term damage." Marcus turned to Juno, seeing her in a new light. The faint glow of her skin seemed brighter, more intense. She met his gaze, a mix of wonder and fear in her eyes as the implications of Dr. Rodriguez's revelation sank in. The ship's communication officer's voice filled the room. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Daxamite fleet. It's General Zan Kor. He's requesting a parley." The conference room erupted into a flurry of activity. Petro barked orders demanding visual contact be established immediately. Within moments, the stern face of General Zan Kor filled the main screen. "Admiral Petro," the Daxamite commander's voice rumbled, "I come with an offer of diplomacy. Recent revelations have caused significant upheaval within our ranks. There are those among us who believe this war has gone on long enough." Marcus felt a surge of hope tempered by caution. He glanced at Juno, seeing his own conflicted emotions mirrored in her expression. Petro's response was measured. "We are open to diplomatic discussions, General. However, given our history, you'll understand if we remain cautious." As the two leaders began to hash out the terms for a potential meeting, Marcus pulled Juno aside. "What do you think?" he whispered. "Can we trust them?" Juno's brow furrowed in concentration. "Xehanort has a reputation for honor, but—" Her words were cut short as a sudden pulse of energy emanated from her body. The ship's lights flickered, and several nearby consoles sparked. Dr. Rodriguez rushed to Juno's side, scanner in hand. "The changes in her physiology are accelerating," she reported, her voice tight with concern. "These energy discharges are likely to become more frequent and powerful." Marcus steadied Juno as she swayed slightly. "We need to move quickly," he said, turning to Petro. "Sir, regardless of these negotiations, I recommend we proceed with the infiltration plan. If diplomacy fails, we need to be ready." Petro nodded grimly. "Agreed. Assemble your team, Marcus. We'll proceed on both fronts." As Marcus and Juno left to prepare for the potential mission, the Horizon took up position at the forefront of Earth's hastily assembled defense fleet. Through the viewports, they could see the distant pinpoints of light that marked the approaching Daxamite armada. In the armory, as they donned their infiltration gear, Marcus caught Juno's hand. "Whatever happens," he said softly, "we're in this together." Juno's alien features softened into what Marcus now recognized as a smile. But before she could respond, another surge of energy pulsed through her, stronger than before. The lights in the armory exploded in a shower of sparks, plunging them into darkness. As emergency lighting flickered on, Marcus and Juno shared a look of willpower tinged with fear. The clock was ticking, both for their mission and for Juno's rapidly changing physiology. With Earth's future hanging in the balance, they made their way to the launch bay, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The tension in the launch bay was palpable as Marcus and Juno prepared for their mission. Suddenly, the ship-wide communication system crackled to life. "All hands, this is Admiral Petro. We've established visual contact with General Zorl's flagship. Report to your stations immediately." Marcus and Juno exchanged a glance before rushing to the bridge. They arrived just as the main view screen flickered to life, revealing the stern visage of the Daxamite commander. His blue features were etched with a mix of purpose and weariness, hinting at the toll the prolonged conflict had taken. Admiral Petro stood tall, his weathered face a mask of calm determination. "General Zan Kor, we are prepared to discuss terms." Before the Daxamite could respond, Juno let out a strangled gasp. "But—" Marcus turned to see her body begin to glow with an intense pulsating light. "Juno!" His words were cut short as a massive electromagnetic pulse erupted from her body. The bridge erupted into chaos as consoles sparked and systems failed. The view screen went dark, cutting off their connection to the Daxamite fleet. "Status report!" Petro barked, his voice barely audible over the blaring alarms. Marcus sprang into action, his military training kicking in. He rushed to the nearest functioning console, fingers flying over the controls. "Primary systems are offline! Switching to auxiliary power!" As he worked to stabilize the ship's core functions, A series of explosions rocked the horizon. Through the viewport, Marcus could see flashes of weapons fire igniting the darkness of space. "Sir, we're under attack," the helmsman reported, his voice strained amidst the chaos. Petro's eyes narrowed. "It seems a faction of the Daxamites decided to take advantage of our temporary weakness. Helm, evasive maneuvers!" The ship lurched as it attempted to avoid the incoming fire, but a direct hit to the A section sent tremors through the hull. "Propulsion systems critically damaged," the helmsman reported, his voice strained amidst the chaos. Marcus's mind raced. He turned to Juno, who was leaning against a bulkhead, her alien features twisted in a mix of pain and confusion. An idea began to form. "Admiral," Marcus said, "our original infiltration plan might be our only shot at ending this before it's too late. The battle provides perfect cover for a stealth approach." Petro's gaze darted between Marcus and the viewport, where the two fleets were now fully engaged. After a moment of consideration, he nodded grimly. "Make it happen, soldier!" Within minutes, Marcus and Juno were boarding a small stealth shuttle in the launch bay. Elena Rodriguez rushed up to them, a sleek device in her hands. "This will amplify the sound frequency that affects Daxamites," she explained hurriedly. "But be careful. Prolonged exposure could have severe consequences for Juno." Marcus nodded, taking the device. He turned to Juno, who was already strapping herself into the co-pilot seat. "Ready?" She met his eyes, a fierce perseverance burning within them. "Let's end this war." The shuttle shot out of the launch bay, immediately engaging its cloaking technology. Marcus piloted with precision, weaving through the chaos of battle. Debris from destroyed ships and energy blasts filled space around them, creating a deadly obstacle course. Juno's enhanced senses proved invaluable as they approached the Daxamite flagship. 3 degrees to port, she called out. "Patrol ship at 2 o'clock. Marcus adjusted their course, narrowly avoiding detection. They were mere moments away from the flagship's hangar when a stray energy blast clipped their wing. Alarms blared as the cloaking device failed. "We've been spotted!" Juno shouted as the flagship's defense systems locked onto them. Marcus gritted his teeth, pushing the shuttle's engines to their limit. "Hold on!" They barreled straight for the open hangar bay, energy blasts sizzling past them with a bone-jarring impact. The shuttle skidded across the hangar floor, coming to rest in a smoking heap, dazed but alive. Marcus and Juno emerged from the wreckage, surprised Daxamite crew members already moving to intercept them. Without hesitation, Marcus drew his weapon and fired, taking down 2 opponents before they could react. Juno launched herself at a group of soldiers, her enhanced strength sending them flying. But Marcus could see the toll it was taking on her. Each use of her newfound abilities seemed to cause her pain, and systems around her flickered and failed as she passed. They fought their way through the ship's corridors, Marcus using his knowledge of Daxamite weak points to incapacitate enemies efficiently. Juno's raw power cleared a path, but her control was slipping. Accidental energy discharges caused doors to malfunction, and life support systems to falter. Finally, they reached the central control room. The doors hissed open to reveal General Xanor himself, flanked by his top officers. His eyes widened in recognition as they fell on Juno. "You!" he snarled. "Traitor to your own kind. Explain yourself." Marcus didn't wait for Juno to respond. He activated the sonic device, filling the room with a high-pitched whine. The effect on the Daxamites was immediate. They doubled over, clutching their heads in agony. But Juno, too, fell to her knees, her face contorted in pain. Pushing aside his concern for her, Marcus rushed to the main console. His fingers flew over the alien controls, accessing the ship's communication systems. With a final keystroke, he broadcast the truth about the suppressed peace negotiations to both fleets. The effect was instantaneous. Across the view screens, Marcus could see Daxamite ships ceasing fire, confusion spreading through their ranks as the information disseminated. But his victory was short-lived. A strangled cry from behind made him turn. Juno lay on the floor, her body racked with violent tremors. The prolonged exposure to the sonic weapon, combined with the stress on her enhanced physiology, had pushed her past her limits. Marcus rushed to her side, cradling her unconscious form. Her skin burned with an unnatural heat, and he could feel tremors running through her body. The realization hit him like a physical blow. In his drive to complete the mission, He might have sacrificed the one person who had come to mean everything to him. Alarms blared throughout the Daxamite flagship, adding to the cacophony of the ongoing battle outside. Marcus found himself at a crossroads, the weight of two civilizations pressing down on him. He had to find a way to stabilize Juno, neutralize any remaining hostile forces on the ship, and somehow use their precarious position to bring a definitive end to this conflict. As he looked down at Juno's pale face, Marcus knew that the next few moments would determine not just their fate, but that of humanity and the Daxamites as well. The path to peace lay before him, fraught with danger and uncertainty. With Juno's life hanging in the balance and the future of two species in his hands, Marcus steeled himself for the challenges ahead. Marcus's heart raced as he cradled Juno's limp form. Her skin burned with an unnatural heat, and tremors racked her body. With a quick glance around the chaotic control room, he made a split-second decision. Reaching out, he deactivated the sonic device, silencing the high-pitched whine that had incapacitated the Daxamites. General Zancor, his blue features contorted in pain, slowly raised his head, his eyes locking onto Marcus, then shifting to Juno's unconscious form. Recognition flashed across his face, followed by a mix of confusion and concern. "Stand down!" Zancor commanded, his voice hoarse. The Daxamite officers, still reeling from the sonic assault, lowered their weapons. The ship's communication system crackled to life. "Marcus, this is Dr. Rodriguez. Do you copy?" "I'm here," Marcus responded, his voice tight with worry. "Juno's condition is critical." Elena's voice came through tense and clinical. "Her enhanced cellular activity combined with the sonic weapon's effects has caused severe molecular instability. We need to stabilize her immediately." Marcus's mind raced. He scanned the room, his gaze falling on a sleek cylindrical pod in the corner. "There's some kind of medical equipment here. Could we use it as a makeshift stasis pod?" "Possibly," Elena replied. "But you'll need help operating it." Marcus turned to Zancor. "General, I need your medical officer now." Zancor hesitated for a moment, then nodded to one of his subordinates, a Daxamite with pale green skin stepping forward, eyeing Marcus wearily. "Help me," Marcus said, gesturing to the pod. "We need to stabilize her." The Daxamite medical officer glanced at Juno, his expression softening at the sight of her critical condition. He moved to the pod, fingers dancing over the controls as they worked to prepare the makeshift stasis chamber. The ship's communication system came to life again. Admiral Petro's voice filled the room. "General Zancor, in light of recent events, I propose an immediate ceasefire and open negotiations." Zancor straightened his gaze, moving from Marcus and Juno to the main view screen. "Agreed, Admiral. It seems we have much to discuss." While the leaders began their dialogue, Marcus and the Daxamite medical officer carefully placed Juno into the pod. The transparent cover slid shut with a soft hiss. "It's working," the Daxamite said, monitoring the readouts. "Her cellular degradation is slowing." Marcus let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding, but their respite was short-lived. "Marcus!" Dr. Rodriguez's voice came through again. "We've made a breakthrough!" A combination of Daxamite regenerative technology and human DNA could potentially reverse the damage to Juno's cells. "That's great news," Marcus replied, hope rising in his chest. "There's a catch," Elena continued, her tone grave. "We need a significant amount of human genetic material. It would require you to undergo a risky bioextraction process." Marcus didn't hesitate. "Do it! What do I need to do?" As Elena explained the procedure, the Daxamite medical officer prepared the necessary equipment. Marcus steeled himself as he was connected to a complex array of tubes and sensors. "Beginning extraction," the Daxamite announced. Pain, like Marcus had never experienced before, coursed through his body. He gritted his teeth, focusing on Juno's face through the pod's transparent cover. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the ship. "General Zancor!" barked orders into his communicator. "What's happening?" Marcus managed to ask through clenched teeth. "Rebels!" Zancor growled. "A faction opposing the peace talks. They're trying to seize control of the ship." The lights flickered ominously. The Daxamite medical officer looked up from his console, worry etched on his face. "The power fluctuations could disrupt the treatment." Despite the agony of the extraction process, Marcus's military instincts kicked in. He beckoned Zancor closer. "General, I can help," he said, his voice strained. "Give me access to your tactical displays." Zancor hesitated for a moment, then nodded. A holographic screen materialized in front of Marcus. Through waves of pain, Marcus analyzed the situation. "Seal off sections B7 through C3, he instructed. "Reroute power from non-essential systems to maintain stability in the medical bay." Zancor relayed the orders. The rebel advance slowed, and the power stabilized as the extraction continued. Marcus guided the loyal Daxamite crew in containing the uprising. His strategic insights combined with Zancor's leadership gradually turning the tide. Hours passed in a blur of pain and tactical decisions. Finally, the Daxamite medical officer announced, "Extraction complete!" initiating cellular reconstruction. Marcus watched, exhausted but alert, as Juno's vital signs began to stabilize. The pod hummed with energy as the combined human-Daxamite treatment took effect. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, Juno's features began to change. Her skin tone shifted, taking on a more human hue. Her facial structure subtly altered, becoming a unique blend of human and Daxamite characteristics. As the process neared completion, Juno's eyes fluttered open. She looked around, disoriented, her gaze finally settling on Marcus. "What happened?" she asked, her voice weak but clear. Marcus smiled, relief washing over him. "It's a long story," he said softly, "but we did it, Ming. We found a way." The pod's cover retracted, and Juno sat up slowly, examining her changed body with a mix of wonder and uncertainty. General Zancor approached, his expression solemn. "Your actions today," he said, addressing both Marcus and Juno, "have opened a path we thought impossible. Perhaps there is hope for lasting peace between our people after all." As if on cue, Admiral Petro's voice came through the communication system. "The Earth Council has agreed to formal peace talks. We're preparing to dock with your ship, General." Marcus and Juno exchanged glances, the weight of the moment settling upon them. They had succeeded in ways they never imagined, but the road ahead was far from certain. As the Horizon maneuvered into position to dock with the Daxamite flagship, Marcus took Juno's hand. Together, they stood at the precipice of a new era in human-Daxamite relations, their own future as intertwined and complex as the peace they had helped forge. The docking clamps engaged with a resounding thud, securing the Horizon to the neutral space station. As the airlock cycled, Marcus felt a surge of anticipation. This was the moment they had fought so hard for, the beginning of formal peace negotiations between humans and Daxamites. He glanced at Juno, noting the slight tremor in her hand as she reached for the airlock controls. Her new hybrid physiology was still a source of uncertainty, but her tenacity remained unwavering. "Ready?" Marcus asked softly. "Garrett." Juno nodded, her eyes reflecting a mix of excitement and apprehension. "Let's make history, Garrett." As the airlock doors slid open, they were greeted by a delegation of station officials, a mix of humans and neutral alien species. The station's cavernous docking bay bustled with activity, filled with diplomats, security personnel, and curious onlookers. Admiral Petro and General Zancor stepped forward, their contrasting uniforms a stark visual reminder of the divide they were to bridge. Marcus and Juno followed closely behind, keenly aware of the symbolism their presence represented. Suddenly, Juno stumbled, her face contorted in pain as she gasped for breath, her legs buckling beneath her. Marcus caught her before she hit the ground, alarm coursing through him as he felt her skin burning with fever. "Juno!" he cried out, cradling her semi-conscious form. "We need medical assistance now." The station's medical team sprang into action, rushing forward with a hover stretcher. Marcus watched helplessly as they whisked Juno away, her labored breathing echoing in his ears. In the medical bay, a flurry of activity surrounded Juno's bed. Human and Daxamite doctors worked side by side, their initial weariness giving way to focused cooperation as they battled to stabilize her condition. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, who had accompanied the Horizon team, addressed Marcus and the assembled leaders. "Juno's hybrid physiology is reacting adversely to the station's artificial atmosphere," she explained, her voice tense. "We're working to recalibrate her body's regulatory systems, but it's uncharted territory." Marcus paced the waiting area, his mind racing. The implications of Juno's collapse extended far beyond her personal well-being. He could see the concern etched on the faces of both human and Daxamite officials. This incident had the potential to derail the fragile peace before negotiations even began. Hours passed in a haze of worry and tense discussions. Finally, Dr. Rodriguez emerged from the treatment room, her expression cautiously optimistic. "We've managed to stabilize her condition," she announced. "Juno's body is adapting, but she'll need time to fully recover." Relief washed over Marcus, but he knew their challenges were nowhere near the end. As he turned to update Admiral Petro and General Zancor, a junior communications officer approached, her face pale. "Sir," she said, her voice low and urgent, "I've intercepted a coded transmission. I think you need to see this." Marcus followed her to a secure terminal, his heart sinking as he decrypted the message. The words on the screen confirmed his worst fears. A plot to sabotage the peace talks, with plans to detonate explosives during the main negotiation session. Without hesitation, Marcus alerted Admiral Petro and General Zancor. The gravity of the situation was immediately apparent to both leaders. "We can't proceed with the talks until we've neutralized this threat," Petro declared, his teeth clenched. Zancor nodded in agreement. "We must form a joint security team to investigate. Our combined knowledge and skills will be crucial in uncovering this plot." Marcus found himself at the helm of this unprecedented cooperative effort. He quickly organized search parties, carefully integrating human and Daxamite personnel to leverage their unique abilities. As they began to sweep the station, he observed the initial awkwardness between the two species gradually giving way to a grudging respect and even moments of camaraderie. In the medical bay, Juno's recovery was progressing faster than expected. Her enhanced senses, a byproduct of her transformation, were coming into sharper focus. As she lay in her bed, surrounded by the hum of medical equipment, she became aware of subtle energy fluctuations in the station's power grid. "Marcus," she called out weakly as he entered her room for a brief visit, "I'm sensing something unusual. There are power surges in specific areas of the station, too regular to be accidental." Marcus leaned in, his interest piqued. "Can you pinpoint the locations?" Juno closed her eyes, concentrating. "Section 47B, and there's another in the level of the main conference area." With this new information, Marcus refocused the search efforts. The joint human Daxamite team converged on the areas Juno had identified, their movements now charged with a sense of purpose. As they approached Section 47B, Marcus's combat instincts kicked into high alert. The corridor ahead was too quiet, too still. He signaled for the team to take cover just as a barrage of energy blasts erupted from a concealed position. The air crackled with weapons fire as Marcus and his team returned fire, their diverse arsenal of human and Daxamite weapons creating a symphony of destruction. Through the chaos, Marcus caught a glimpse of their attackers, a mix of human and Daxamite extremists united in their opposition to peace. The firefight intensified, and Marcus felt the searing heat of an energy blast graze his arm. He stumbled, his vision blurring from the pain. Through the haze, he saw several of his team members fall, all incapacitated by a strange pulsating weapon that seemed to affect both humans and Daxamites alike. Back in the command center, Juno watched the unfolding battle with growing horror. Despite the protests of her medical team, she made a split-second decision, ripping out her IV lines. She staggered to her feet, her body still weak but her will unshakable. "I have to help them," she declared, her voice leaving no room for argument. As Juno raced toward the battle, her hybrid physiology hummed with untapped potential. Marcus and his remaining team members found themselves cornered. The extremists advanced, their combined weapon raised for a final, devastating blast. Suddenly, a blur of motion caught Marcus's eye. Juno burst into the corridor, her body glowing with an otherworldly energy. The extremists fired their weapon, but the blast seemed to dissipate around her, leaving her unharmed. With a cry that was part human drive and part Daxamite power, Juno launched herself at the attackers. Her enhanced strength sent them flying, their weapons clattering uselessly to the ground. In a matter of moments, the tide of the battle had turned. As the last of the extremists surrendered, Marcus struggled to his feet, his wounds momentarily forgotten in the face of Juno's incredible display. Their eyes met across the debris-strewn corridor, a wordless understanding passing between them. The immediate threat had been neutralized. But Marcus knew this was only the beginning. As he coordinated the securing of the prisoners and the gathering of intelligence, His mind raced with the implications of what had just occurred. The joint human-Daxamite operation had succeeded against all challenges, potentially saving the peace talks from disaster. But the cost had been high, and the wounds, both physical and metaphorical, would take time to heal. As medics swarmed the area, tending to the injured, Marcus felt a wave of dizziness wash over him. The adrenaline that had kept him going began to fade, and he became acutely aware of the severity of his own injuries. His vision swam, the faces around him blurring into indistinct shapes. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was Juno's concerned face hovering above him, her lips forming words he couldn't hear. Marcus slipped into unconsciousness, unaware that his fight was nowhere near the end. In the coming hours, his life would hang in the balance, with Juno faced with a decision that would not only determine his fate, but potentially reshape the future of human-Daxamite relations. Marcus drifted in and out of consciousness, his body racked with pain from the injuries sustained during the battle. The medical bay hummed with activity, as doctors and nurses worked tirelessly to stabilize his condition. Juno stood nearby, her face etched with concern as she watched the monitors display his weakening vital signs. Dr. Elena Rodriguez approached Juno, her expression grave. "His condition is deteriorating rapidly. We've done everything we can with conventional treatments, but it's not enough." Juno's mind raced, searching for a solution. She glanced down at her own hands, remembering the incredible power that had coursed through her body during the fight. An idea formed, both thrilling and terrifying in its implications. "What about my blood?" Juno asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Could a transfusion help him?" Upcomfrong. Dr. Rodriguez's eyes widened at the suggestion. She quickly conferred with the Daxamite medical officer. Their discussion was a rapid-fire exchange of medical jargon and theoretical possibilities. "It's risky," Dr. Rodriguez finally said, turning back to Juno. "Your hybrid physiology is unique. We don't know how Marcus's body would react to your blood," the Daxamite officer interjected. "But if we could filter and modify the blood, we might be able to reduce the risks. It's never been attempted before, but it could be his only chance." Juno looked at Marcus's pale face, her decision crystallizing. "Do it! Whatever it takes!" The medical team sprang into action, setting up a complex array of equipment to process Juno's blood. As they worked, Juno took her place beside Marcus, their eyes meeting in a moment of unspoken understanding. "I'm here," Juno whispered, gripping his hand. "Stay with me." The transfusion began, Juno's modified blood flowing into Marcus's veins. At first, nothing seemed to change. Then, gradually, Marcus's monitors began to show improvement. Color returned to his cheeks, and his breathing steadied. Juno gasped as an unexpected sensation washed over her. Suddenly, she was seeing flashes of Marcus's memories, his childhood on Earth, his first day at the academy, the moment he first saw her on the battlefield. The images flowed through her mind in a dizzying cascade. Marcus's eyes flew open, his gaze locking onto Juno. Without speaking, he communicated his confusion and wonder at the strange connection forming between them. "I can feel what you're feeling," Juno said, awe in her voice. "I can see your thoughts." The medical team watched in amazement as Marcus's wounds began to heal at an accelerated rate. Within hours, injuries that should have taken weeks to mend were almost completely healed. As Marcus regained his strength, news of the extraordinary events in the medical bay spread throughout the station. Admiral Petro and General Zancor arrived to witness the miracle firsthand. "This is unprecedented," General Zanor said, his usual stoic demeanor replaced by genuine wonder. "The implications for both our species are enormous." Admiral Petro nodded in agreement. "This could revolutionize not just our medical treatment, but our entire approach to interspecies relations." In the days that followed, as Marcus continued to recover, he and Juno explored the depths of their newfound connection. They discovered they could communicate without words, sharing thoughts and emotions with a mere glance. The peace talks resumed with renewed vigor, energized by the story of Marcus and Juno's literal blood bond. What had once seemed an insurmountable divide between humans and Daxamites now appeared bridgeable. During a crucial negotiation session, Marcus and Juno sat side by side, their mental link allowing them to provide unique insights into both species' perspectives. Their unspoken communication became a powerful tool in finding common ground on even the most contentious issues. As the final details of the peace agreement were being hammered out, Marcus and Juno's attention suddenly snapped to a shadowy figure lurking at the back of the conference room. Through their shared senses, they detected a surge of hostile intent moments before the figure reached for a concealed weapon. Without a word, Marcus and Juno leapt into action, moving in perfect synchronization. They crossed the room in seconds. Marcus disarmed a would-be assassin with a precise strike, while Juno neutralized a second assailant neither of them had seen with their eyes alone. The room erupted into chaos as security personnel swarmed in. Admiral Petro and General Zancor quickly ushered to safety, their eyes wide with shock at the near miss. In the aftermath of the foiled assassination attempt, Marcus and Juno found themselves at the center of attention once again. Their extraordinary abilities and the seamless cooperation they displayed became a symbol of what humans and Daxamites could achieve together. As the dust settled and the peace treaty was finally signed, Marcus and Juno stood on a balcony overlooking the vast expanse of space, their hands intertwined, their minds linked in a way that defied explanation. What happens now? What happens now? Marcus asked, both aloud and in the shared space of their thoughts. Juno smiled, a mix of excitement and apprehension coloring her emotions. I'm not sure, but whatever it is, we'll face it together. Their gaze turned to the stars stretching out before them, a universe of possibilities waiting to be explored. As they stood there contemplating their future, a new chapter in human-Daxamite relations was just beginning to unfold.